Happy Oscar Sunday, everyone. Sir Owen Disney here with another daily vlog. And before we get started, before I get to AJ's weekend movie reviews, I do want to mention a couple addendums from yesterday. I was talking about New Fantasyland, and real quick, I was talking about my lanyard that I got from the cast member at the partner statue after the opening celebration for New Fantasyland. Well, what I forgot to mention, and what I neglected to mention, was the best part of New Fantasyland. I pretty much mentioned it for like a second, but I didn't really get to talk about it, and that is Be Our Guest. Be Our Guest is a dining experience, to say the least. It's available for both lunch and dinner, and when it first opened, it was available as no reservations needed on lunch, and reservations needed at dinner. Well, now you need reservations for both, and they're even testing out My Magic Plus, like a Fast Pass Plus version for this restaurant, because it's so popular. There's 3 different rooms you can go into, and it's really well detailed, and it's not a character meal, not at all. But occasionally, Beast is there taking photos and talking to, well, not talking to, but visiting the patrons. So he shows up every once in a while. He's not there all the time. He shows up every once in a while. Now, the counter service lunch is my personal favorite. Actually, I'll go out on a limb and say it's my favorite counter service in all of Walt Disney World, without any question whatsoever. Because when we went for reunion this year, and I mentioned Be Lynn's Guest, where all of us got treated to lunch at Be Our Guest restaurant by Lynn Testa, who was awesome and a cool guy, and I enjoyed hanging out with him and everyone at Reunion 2012. I cannot wait till the dates are announced for Reunion 2013, and I hope that as of next Sunday for the official February WDW Today Live podcast, all those dates will be announced, and once they are, booking will start being booked. So I will book it immediately, and Will and I will be one step closer away from getting everything booked. Unfortunately, I gotta wait till May to book my DVC reservations, but that's another story altogether. Now, one thing I did like about Be Our Guest, we actually had the opportunity to try everything, and when I say everything, I mean everything. Now, I didn't because, obviously, as everyone knows, I'm a picky eater, and a picky eater is quite the understatement. But when it comes down to it, honestly, I got to try some things I really enjoyed. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to get the desserts because I was chatting with everyone at the table and everyone around me, and that was really cool. I mean, I met some really awesome people at Reunion 2012, hanging out with Scott. Pretty much, that was really fun. I had a great time with him. We hit the parks a lot. And Rich and Ricky, they're amazing people and really cool hanging out with them as well. So hopefully, if it's not this year, in the next couple years, I'll be able to hang out with all of them again. And of course, everybody else I met at Reunion, mentioning Josh and John and Scarlett and Laurel and, of course, Annette and Becky and Colleen and Matt and Len and Scopa and Newell. Just everyone I met at Reunion. All a bunch of really awesome people. But I digress. And I went off a tangent, so I'll talk about what I was going to talk about. And basically, what I want to talk about is this. Be Our Guest restaurant has one of the best counter service meals that exists on property. Now, I don't like bread. I just don't. It just doesn't work for me. I'll eat it on pizza because that's crust. That's fine. I like biscuits, but it's not exactly the same thing. Cornbread is good, but not always. And that's pretty much it. Because I like bread in one way only. Universally, if it's garlic bread. So, there's a grilled steak sandwich at Be Our Guest, and I got it to try. So of course I took the bread off, and I was just going to eat the steak, and that was going to be awesome. I started eating the steak, and the steak was really, really good. And then I looked at the bread, and I noticed the bread had a garlic spread on it. Yes, basically it was a garlic bread grilled steak sandwich with fries. And it was awesome. And it is the best counter service meal on property, bar none. You get an experience, you get a dining experience, not necessarily a character experience, but it is an experience to eat at Be Our Guest. And one thing I will recommend, the desserts, all the cupcakes, they're top notch. We actually went back that night and got dinner because Scott had a dining reservation, so I joined him and I actually had my cupcake and it was awesome. And I got to try their fruit punch. And the fruit punch was really good. And I paid the nearly $20 to get the collector's cup, which is awesome looking, and it glows and it lights up and it's really cool. I'll show it to you sometime. But I want to talk about that. I wanted to put over Be Our Guest because I didn't really get to when I was talking about New Fantasyland. So that was the last thing I wanted to say about that when it came to New Fantasyland. But it's Sunday. It's Academy Awards Sunday, and AJ is actually on his way right now. But he sent me the video, wow, long day. He sent me the prerequisite email giving his weekend movie reviews. And this week we watched Snitch and Dark Skies. And we're going to have a review of The Haunting in Connecticut Part 2. And AJ has told me that this is one of his favorite reviews and it had to be included. So it was done a couple weeks ago, but there was really no place to put it, and obviously everything was way too packed last week. So this is what we're going to go with. And given the fact that we've got The Last Exorcism 2 coming out next Friday, I think it was a better time than ever to do this review. So I'm going to sit down in my chair and we're going to delve into AJ's weekend movie reviews for Oscar weekend 2013. Sinuses are amazing, aren't they? Okay. Dark Skies. It appears Dark Skies set out to be a chilling horror story that was a cross between Insidious and an episode of The Twilight Zone. Instead, we get a version of Signs that's a hell of a lot funnier. And from the director of Legion and Priest, yeah, that killed your hopes pretty damn fast, didn't it? Now we start off getting to know the family that will be put through torture for the next hour and a half, which would be a bit scary though, if not for the fact that these people are so miserable, so unlikable, and so nails on a chalkboard annoying. You can't wait to watch bad things happen to them. We first meet the oldest of the two boys, Jesse, played by Dakota Goyo, who you might remember as that unbearable little brain tumor from Real Steel, and his friend who is just called Rat, which is LJ Benet. Rat is the first of many things wrong with this movie. And when you see this little tool, you'll know exactly why. He's basically a PG-13 wannabe version of Leo Fitzpatrick from Kids. The parents, Lacey, Carrie Russell, and Daniel, Josh Hamilton, are practically broke to the point where they shut off their alarm system, among other things, just to save money. Now we're treated to an attempt to build character when we see Daniel rejected at a job interview. And before we have time to say, "Aw, poor guy," he begins beating the crap out of his car like a psychopath. One night, strange things begin to happen at night. And it's pretty obvious they aren't going to be any big scares in your movie when the next best thing the creepy crawlies in the night can do to scare you is stack your kitchen items. Eat all of your lettuce, but not the meat, and take all the pictures in the house out of their frames. Yeah, that last one confused me at first, because with the way that it's shot, we can see their horrified faces. Then the scary score kicks in and cuts to the empty frames. The funny thing was, during this startling revelation, they showed practically the whole living room, and I had no idea what even had been done until a helpful close-up of the frames in the next scene. Oh yeah, and the whole "they eat lettuce but not meat," that thing never comes back. Now weirder things then begin to happen. Daniel has a suspiciously itchy ear, flocks of birds fly into their windows and die. Lacey slams her head repeatedly against a glass window until it breaks, which could very well have been Carrie Russell caught on camera as she realized how this movie was turning out. And in a very memorably hilarious scene, Daniel wanders into the backyard in the middle of the night and looks into the abyss with his mouth agape. as if he had a big yawn and just got stuck. Which then leads to him having a nosebleed. Because every damn horror movie in the entire universe trying to be ambiguous has to have characters with a gratuitous nosebleed that ultimately means absolutely nothing. Now, one thing that really threw me off was a bizarre subplot in the middle that basically tried to turn everything into a coming-of-age movie, with Jesse having a crush on the daughter of Lacey's best friend. After awkwardly using a pickup line he got from a porn movie and trying to feel her up, she miraculously actually gives him his first kiss after freaking out for a second. Not only did that make this whole thing hard to buy, but the girl, played by Annie Thurman, has an elegance and looks like she could be the little sister of Emma Stone or Jane Levy. And, well, frankly, Goya reminds me a lot of the young Jodie Foster. They go together like socks and sandals. As if all this wasn't bad enough, you have to have the age-old cliche that all of these characters are beyond idiotic. I mean, these are the dumbest people in a horror movie in a long time. And everyone knows how high that bar is set. Now, obviously, you have the one character that's in denial no matter what happens or what they witness. Despite the fact that they are flat broke, Daniel has no job, and Lacey can't sell a house, they pay to have their alarm system turned back on. And he buys not one, not two, not three, not four, not even five, but 6 security cameras for every room in the house. Nothing is seemingly financially sacrificed. Now, before the final showdown, they buy guns and a dog. Yeah, that's right, a dog. They're going up against a small army of aliens, and for protection, get a dog. Not 2 dogs, not 4 dogs, 1 singular dog. The same kind of dog that Michael Myers simply walked up to and strangled in the original Halloween. I'm sure they could afford more than 1 dog since they seem to have the ability to pull money they don't have out of their ass when it's convenient. And of course the horror cliche checklist would not be complete without a visit to the character actor looking for a paycheck while playing an expert on the whole situation. In this case, it's J.K. Simmons, who looks as if he just came from a jungle expedition. Normally, even the worst of horror movies could have at least 1 or 2 genuine chills, no matter how bad the rest of it is. This movie could not bring 1 real scare, or even a slight tingle of a chill. Chill, really? Nothing. The whole thing was actually quite boring. By the end, there's no twist, no solution, the characters do not change or become any smarter, and there is nothing to leave an impact. It just goes right by the book until it decides to show you mercy by ending. We're going to talk about Snitch here. Since I could kind of tell by the trailer that this may not be what it was being advertised as, I went into Snitch with an open mind, and wasn't that surprised to find I was right. A total of 4 people walked out of the theater during the movie because I believe they were expecting one of Johnson's hardcore action movies. But, in actuality, it is a pretty straightforward drama with no more than 2 or 3 action scenes throughout it. It is a shame those people left, because when you have an idea what kind of movie it is, you'll probably like it pretty well. Johnson plays John Matthews, a normal guy who goes to work about his own business and has a son, Rafi Gavron. When his son is set up in a drug deal, he teams up with the DEA, which involves some good scenes with Susan Sarandon, who seems to be willing to show up in anything nowadays. He pretty much forces himself into going undercover, and then they have no choice but to back him up. With the help of a tough cop, Barry Pepper, and one of his employees, John Bernthal, who used to be in the drug trade, he manages to track down major drug dealer Malik, Michael Kenneth Williams, and gets in way over his head when tracking Malik, brings him to the head supplier in the area, a major threat simply called El Topo, Benjamin Bratt. Now, this movie isn't without its problems, starting with the most notable of them, John Bernthal, who the entire world simply knows as Shane from The Walking Dead. I was so happy when Shane was killed off, and I was hoping to never have to see him again. But unfortunately, I will, as after this movie, he is lined up to be in Scorsese's upcoming The Wolf of Wall Street. While watching this movie, I was slowly coming to the conclusion that maybe it wasn't Shane I hated so much, but Bernthal's an actor. Here he plays a character that is meant to be sympathetic and somebody you'll want to be behind and support. But I just really did not like him at all and kept waiting for his character to be killed. And to my disappointment, he has about as equal screen time with Johnson. Now another thing that kind of got to me was how little Benjamin Bratt is in it. They spend a good amount of time building up his character through word of mouth. He is clearly a guy everyone in the movie fears, and he is crucial to the plot and motives of other characters, and I would have loved to have gotten to know even more about him, but I'd be generous if I told you Brad has more than 4 minutes of screen time. You know, I can understand the method of the less we see of him, the more threatening he seems, but the man is in desperate need of a good role, and I thought this could have been it. There was a lot of good about this movie as well. Though I don't think Johnson was fully ready to take on a dramatic part before cameras rolled, he is on his way there. And I think he could be something pretty established as an actor of many talents in due time. He does something very different here, as he normally plays the guy everyone crosses the street to avoid. But here, he's the guy living in fear, whose spirit shrinks 3 sizes smaller when there's a gun in his face, and this is real fear, not the exaggerated wuss he played in Southland Tales. Pepper is also very good, as well as Williams, who looks right out of Gone Baby Gone, which I say by complete coincidence, seeing how Williams is in Gone Baby Gone. He also seems like his character is slightly less effective descendant of Chalky White, his character on Boardwalk Empire. There are a couple of great emotional scenes where John visits his son in prison. Young actor Gavron really handles the scenes with a perfect essence of fear and innocence. But the real star of this movie, who should be up for the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, is Barry Pepper's magnificent beard. I mean, seriously, I want a red carpet interview with the beard. I want a starring role for the beard. I want a documentary on the beard's life. Everything. But in all seriousness, however, this movie, while not perfect by any means, should be checked out. Despite the miscommunication in advertising, the movie lets you know pretty early what genre it is and where it's headed, as long as you're willing to stick it out. And as for action fans, even if there's not that many action scenes, the explosive ending is satisfying. Now, based upon what I've heard in the past, apparently this is the review that I've been needing to read for a long time. Now, full disclosure before I get to this, I hated Haunting in Connecticut, like, with a passion, and this sequel seemed like it would be straight to DVD. So, I'm going to read what AJ thought of it, because he told me that he put a lot into it, and I see that this notepad that I have here has about 2 more pages left, so we're going to shoot on this movie, and we're going to do it right now. The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia. Surely gaining fame for its extraordinarily confused title, Ghosts of Georgia is the story of Lisa, who is tasked to take pills because she hallucinates ghosts, which will become incredibly confusing later, as we're supposed to buy that ghosts are real, yet they do disappear when she takes her pills. So I guess they really are hallucinations, but by some odd coincidence, the person that sees ghosts just happens to come across some real ones. Good lord, I couldn't get through that summary without getting sidetracked with this movie's ridiculous setup. So her and her husband, sister, and daughter go out to their new house in Georgia, where Heidi starts to communicate with the ghost of an old man named Mr. Gordy. I guess by now you're starting to realize this has not a single thing to do with The Haunting in Connecticut. Not one returning character, not one reference to the events of that movie, nothing. Now let me talk about what I liked about this movie before I go into the list of things wrong with it. A list so long Santa probably wouldn't even want to type it. What I liked was, even though this movie is heavy on the jump scares, it does attempt the atmospheric horror and doesn't always go for the loud boo scare. Now there are some genuinely creepy moments where ghosts lurk in the background with no score playing, and that's about the most credit I can give it. It doesn't take long for them to abandon that idea. Now the first thing totally wrong with this movie is that it doesn't take a damn breath. Usually movies that are good about reserving their scares and letting the characters have time to introduce themselves and interact with each other, and we get to know details about who is who and how they relate. Even the abysmal Paranormal Activity movies do this right. This movie, I kid you not, has a ghost in every single scene. From the very first scene to the very last scene, there is always a ghost somewhere. Whether it stands quietly in the background and stares, or jumps out of the darkness and in our nightmare about ghosts. I mean...
You skipped a line.
Oh, well, AJ's here. That's awesome. Whether it stands quietly in the background and stares or jumps out of the darkness and roars in your face. And it doesn't help that every 5 minutes or so someone has a vision and or nightmare about ghosts. I mean, I understand the title has words like haunting and ghosts in it, but it might as well just be called Ghosts, Ghosts, more Ghosts, and of course, Ghosts! Now the only scene I recall that I didn't have a ghost in it is an embarrassing scene where Murray is outacted by a raccoon. The plot continues when the ghost of Mr. Gordy tells Heidi that there is money buried on the land, which Murray manages to dig up. Despite this, Lisa still denies the ghost, even though he lurks behind her while she works in the kitchen. Mr. Gordy is a creepy-looking ghost. He's the old man in a suit and a hat kind of ghost. But he quickly ceases to become creepy when he pretty much becomes a regular character given how much we see him just standing there all the time. The plot then takes an odd turn when we learn that this area used to be a plantation a century or two ago. So yes, we get ghost slaves. Lots and lots of ghost slaves who stare at you while making use of the old swing hanging on a tree. Yeah, normally in a ghost story, ghosts have unfinished business that they need to attend to so they can rest in peace. The only goal these ghosts seem to have is to stare and smile and try to be scary. Now these ghosts, however, just start to become something a little odd. I must say, for a ghost movie, this film is excessively disgusting. It almost becomes a zombie movie the way the ghosts suddenly start to look like decaying skeletons, and they can somehow make other characters vomit maggots and bugs or make bloody wires come out of your mouth and stick to the ceiling. There's also a ghost that acts as a main antagonist, I guess, but we mostly see him in silhouette, and his shape and lighting around him reminded me a lot of Pinhead. There's also a brutal, admittedly effective flashback to a taxidermist who was hung by a tree, but not before he was cut open alive and stuffed. Just to fit his profession. Now there are so many things big and small wrong with this movie. I could write all day. There's a scene that particularly stood out in a bad way, involving a window in the kitchen. Now very early in this movie, they get a scare from the audience by having her doing dishes in front of this mirror as a ghost face appears on it. But towards the end of the movie, that window comes back and we linger on it in the same way. But nothing happens. I understand getting false scares from people that have seen way too many horror movies, but to use your own previous scare to provoke a false scare comes off a tad arrogant. Plus, there's the cliches that will never die, including the "it was just an animal" scare. And for some reason, the girl that has to go get her laundry from the outside when it's pitch black darkness. Now, I guess no one in horror nowadays does their laundry during the day. I didn't really like the first, and only when you think about it, Haunting in Connecticut, when I saw it, when it was first released in theaters about 4 years ago. But compared to this, I like that it was a lot more of a mystery that gradually unraveled, and new things were brought in that made you wonder where it would go next. This is just a bunch of random weird shit happening, and it gets a last-minute explanation in the last 5 minutes. And the first one was much more believable as the true story it claims to be. Despite everything I just described that happens, this one too claims to be true, even ending with pictures of the real people portrayed in the movie. I may have to research to see what exactly happened in real life. Sure as hell wasn't what I just watched. And it was worth every second of waiting. Until tomorrow, that's all I gotta say about that.